Ethan Parker.
Here.
Kenny Sullivan.
Here.
Andrea Beasley.
Here.
Jim Dubovic.
Here.
I have not heard from Ty. We did receive official word from Chad McAvery and Susan Manette that they would not be able to attend. I would just respectfully ask that you guys take action to excuse the absences.
I'll make a motion to excuse the absence of all three. I mean, Ty, Chad, and Susan.
A second.
I just wanted to make sure I had all the names right.
A second.
We got a second.
Oh, I second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion is passed. Next item on the agenda is approval, if you can remember back this far, of the September 23rd planning board meeting minutes. Anybody have any comments or changes to make to that? Motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes as written.
A second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I'm going to be voting since we need 4 usually. Fourth item, review request, A, 4A, Emerald Isle Code of Ordinance Amendment discussion. I'll let Chris explain that.
Okay. Greg, could you put the presentation on, please? All right, I'm going to start very briefly and then pass it on to Mark to do his presentation. So we've got, first item on the agenda is Emerald Isle Code of Ordinance Amendment discussion. So during the December 10th, 2024 regular meeting of the Board of Commissioners, they unanimously approved a motion instructing planning staff and the planning board to review legal staff's recommended changes to section 9.5.3 of the Emerald Isle Unified Development Ordinance. The commissioners are looking for a recommendation from the planning board on the proposed changes. And I'm going to pass it over to Mark. He's going to give a presentation not only of the changes, but their review that led up to recommending the changes.
Good evening, Board. My name is Mark Salato. I'm here on behalf of the Carolina Law Group today. So as Mr. Seberg mentioned, we have prepared this presentation initially for the December Board of Commissioners meeting. It was given by Mr. Kirby Smith, who could not be here today, so I will be giving it for you guys today. So, and there it is. So we were given some goals by the board of what they wanted to address with the UDO. Specifically, those goals were to identify when the town could specifically impose fines for violation and to whom those fines can be against, the exact costs that the town can legally fine property owners or responsible persons. We'll get to that distinguish in a bit. And then identify conflicts, ambiguities, and points of confusion as they pertain to the UDO. So we have 6 issues that we were able to parse out of that assignment, and we will start with, must all fines be levied upon the property owner? So the UDO makes 2 different people that can be fined. There is responsible persons and the owner. Now, as you can see there, the definitions are pulled directly from the UDO. Responsible persons apply to somewhat to people who own, but also can be tenants who are renting possibly from the land, or contractors who are performing work on the land. Whereas owner is the person, as you see, who's vested fee ownership, dominion or title of real personal property as evidenced by GIS, will, whatever it may be. So our recommendation on this one is that the UDO does not require owners to be fined. However, it would be within the town's best interest to levy fines against the owner as identified by the Carteret County Tax Office. Any fines not paid could be a lien against that property, and the owner has a direct interest in making sure that any issues are taken care of, whereas tenants, contractors have a lesser duty to solve those problems. Now, that being said, the UDO does provide for certain instances where responsible persons are to be fined versus owners, and we will see that further in this presentation. So the second issue we had is specifically, can contractors be fined for violating the UDO? And as you can see here, each specific provision gives somewhat of a different answer. So we'll start with 951, and for reference, all of the 95 ordinances are special remedies, whereas 94 will be general remedies, and we'll get to that a little bit more later. But as you can see, 951, anything related to flood damage prevention, applies solely to the property owner. Whereas stormwater management violations, the notice is given to the owner, but civil penalties may be levied against any person who violates 9.5.2. 9.5.3 does not specify who is to receive the notice, but guarantees that the property owner will be responsible to guarantee the protection of all dune systems identified in the natural topography. So, to answer number 2, it depends. 9.4, general remedies, only speaks of offenders, meaning that anyone who violates the ordinance can be fined. 9.51 specifically states that contractors cannot be fined, whereas 9.5.2 allows contractors to be fined, and 9.5.3 is ambiguous as to who is to be fined, but is clear that notice must be given to the property owner. And as noted there, all fines under 9.5.3 are to be $1,000 with no discretion to increase or decrease. Moving on to issue number 3, should a fine be levied if damage occurs to a neighboring property? Now, any issue dealing with damage to neighboring properties is outside of the scope of the UDO. The UDO deals with development and redevelopment of one's own property and establishes regulations for zoning, use, density, intensity. You can see the rest. Now, what we recommend here is that the town uses its other alternatives available to it. For starters, civil and criminal remedies are available at the state level to deal with these issues. Anyone whose trees, vegetation, or dunes are damaged by intentional acts of another may recover, or negligent acts of another, may recover damages in civil court, whereas somebody whose trees, vegetation, or dunes are damaged by intentional acts specifically can also pursue criminal actions. And below you will see 2 statutes that deal directly with willful wanton injury to real property and injury to trees, crops, lands of another. As you see there, the first one allows for fines and potentially up to a Class 1 felony if found convicted of 14.127 of the North Carolina statutes, whereas a violation of 14.128 would only be a Class 1 misdemeanor. Now, moving forward, this will be a few parts into this issue. Under the UDO, what may the town fine violators? As I mentioned, the UDO distinguishes between general and special remedies, and 9.4 is more of the catch-all in those 2. So under 9.4, an offender has a 15-day window in which they are to correct their violation upon initial notice. Upon failure to correct this violation, an offender has 7 days to pay their fine once assessed. Fines under this section do not accumulate on a daily basis and are addition to other penalties and remedies provided by the UDO. And should the town need to, after a certain amount of time, they may initiate a civil action to recover penalties in the nature of a debt or a lien on the property. So starting with recommendations here, the UDO is ambiguous as to the timeline of assessing fines. What is clear is the amount of fines based on the level of violation, and that there is an initial 15-day window to secure compliance. If the violator fails to comply within this 15-day window, they then will be issued their first citation, thus giving them 7 days to pay the fine to become compliant. What is not clear is once this first 7 days elapse, what happens next? Is there another 15-day window in which to give them compliance? Is there a 7-day window in which another citation is assessed? There is no answer in the UDO as of now. What we recommend would be an established timeline in the UDO, somewhere about, say, 9.4, that would lay out exactly what the timeline for 9.4 violations would be. As you see there, day 1 is when the violation were to occur and notice is given. notice being the more important factor for this. And from there, there's 15 days to secure compliance, and so on and so forth. Meaning there is a consistent, I guess you can say, 22-day window in which everyone can expect from one violation to be assessed to another. Then, after day 45, if the third notice is given and fines are still not paid, the town may then go to pursue a civil action in court. So moving more into the 9.4 general remedies, there are both criminal, as we mentioned, and civil penalties available to the town. As we mentioned, the criminal penalties apply to any person, firm, or corporation convicted of violating the ordinances, and whoever is guilty of violating 9.4 can be guilty of a Class 3 misdemeanor and shall be fined an amount not to exceed $500. Civil penalties, upon your first citation, which would be after that 15-day notice, would be $50. From there on, at this point, it is unclear when the second citation, which would be a $100 fine, or the third and subsequent citations of $200 were to be assessed. But per the UDO, that is the schedule of which civil penalties are to be assessed. So moving on to some more remedies of the town, as we've mentioned, the town can issue the notice of violation. When the staff determines that work or activity has been undertaken in violation of the UDO, written notice of violation is to be issued. Notice is delivered to the holder of the development approval and to the landowner if the landowner is not the holder of that approval. Additionally, the town may use stop work orders upon the discovery of a violation in which the staff orders that specific part or the entire part of work to be immediately halted until compliance is achieved. This order is also in writing, directed to the person conducting the activity, state the specific reasons and why it is in violation, and under what conditions work may be resumed. Violation of a stop work order is additionally a Class 1 misdemeanor. There are also judicial remedies available under 9.4 for the town, the first of which would be an injunction. The town may apply to the appropriate division of Carteret County or state court to apply for a mandatory or prohibitory injunction commanding the defendant or property owner to correct the unlawful condition and to cease unlawful use. Similarly, an order of abatement may be entered in addition to an injunction, which may direct that buildings be destroyed or closed, fixtures be moved or removed entirely, improvements, alterations, modifications, or repairs be made, and or any other action necessary to bring the property into compliance. Now, further from there is the execution of court decisions. Should the property owner fail or refuse to comply with an injunction or order of abatement, the defendant may be cited for contempt. If authorized, the town may execute this order of abatement and will have a lien on the property in the same nature of a mechanic's lien. And the defendant may secure cancellation of such an order by paying all the costs and by posting a bond for compliance with the order. Now, cancellation of an order of abatement does not necessarily cancel an injunction. So it is important to note when assessing these what is being assessed and what it takes to remove them. Moving on to the specific penalties, 9.51 provides for the flood damage prevention. As mentioned earlier, this is given to the owner or occupant, and should they fail to take prompt corrective action, the floodplain administrator must give them the order to remedy the violation within 60 days. Failure to comply to this order shall be punishable by a misdemeanor and at the discretion of the court. So they have the ability to impose further fines at their discretion. Under 9.52 and further under 9.34, the town shall give the owner, as we mentioned, notice of existing defects. If they fail to commence within 30 days, the town may then take their necessary corrective action. And any person who violates either of the stormwater management regulations is subject to a civil penalty of no less than 100 and no more than 1,000 for every day during which the violation continues. Now, the biggest issue with this one is that the UDO is silent as to who is to determine that fine, as well as what criteria is to be established when making that variation between $100 and $1,000. So our recommendation there, as we will be discussing today, is for 9.5.3 to definitively state who sets the fine and what criteria is determined to set the amount. It is our recommendation, based on current existing practice in the town, that the planning director set the fine, set a firm fine, and for them to assess scheduled amounts for violations under this ordinance. And further into 9.5 special remedies is the dunes and vegetation, which a construction or land disturbance without a required DNV permit is a $1,000 flat fine, and no notice is required. So should the town find a construction or land disturbance occurred without a permit, $1,000 fine is automatic and no notice need be applied. Failure to comply with an approved DNV permit is additionally a $1,000 fine. Similarly, no notice is required if the town is to determine that property owner has gone outside the scope of their DNV permit. Failure to restore a dune in a required natural area after 60 days of notice is a $1,000 fine. Upon notice of a dune issue, there is not to be a fine. It is only after that 60 days. And then for the killing, damaging, destroying, removal, or failure to restore or replace a tree, and mind you, tree is specifically defined as being 3 inches wide caliper and 10 feet high. Failure to replace after 60 days notice, similarly, is a $1,000 fine per tree for every day the owner does not bring property into compliance. Each day after the 60 days shall be a separate and new civil violation, meaning these fines compound after 60 days. And for the purposes of these regulations, the removal of each tree and the failure to replace each tree after 60 days are viewed as individual violations. Lastly, specific regulations in 9.5 related to signs give that notice of violation must be given to any person violating the statute. It does not distinguish between property owners or responsible parties. And 10 days after that notice is given, if the sign is not compliant, or if no good faith effort has been put forward to it, that party will be guilty of a misdemeanor and subject to a fine of $100 per day that they are out of accordance. And that fine is retroactive to the day they were first notified. Now, so that is a schedule of the fines that can be assessed. So now we're going to move to a separate issue of when the UDO requires 60 days for vegetation to be replanted. Unlike with trees, the UDO does not require vegetation as it is defined in the ordinance that has been unlawfully removed, destroyed, or altered to be replaced within 60 days. It's a violation of the UDO to remove this vegetation unless an exception applies, but it is not a further fine to not replace it. The UDO also imposes a $1,000 fine for this land disturbance without a permit, as just mentioned. So what we recommend and what you guys will be put forth before you today is a mirrored 9.53 that mirrors the recommendations that we've given you so far. So it is a little small on that screen, but I think you guys have a copy closer to you. It lays it out in a much easier to digest way. So violations are, as specifically mentioned in A through D, are distinct violations. 1, construction or land disturbance without a permit. A separate violation for a tree that is damaged or destroyed or removed without a dunes and vegetation permit. Another violation for vegetation removed, and a violation for dunes that are removed. Further, the remedies provided would be a civil penalty of $1,000 for any of the aforementioned violations, and requirements that dunes, trees, and vegetation are to be replanted so that there is uniformity, so that there is no question involved as to whether something is a tree or vegetation. And then finally, once everything has been approved, a certificate of occupancy will be issued, and should the town find further issues, a certificate of occupancy may be withheld. And lastly, the issue we had before us was whether the UDO allows for daily fines. And now, as a general rule, the UDO does not allow fines to accrue on a daily basis, but as we've mentioned, there's a few special instances in 9.5. Fines may accrue on a daily basis if a person fails to restore the land to its natural state or fails to replace trees within 60 days of a violation notice, and a fine that is retroactively allowed under the sign regulation that we just mentioned, and any fine pertaining to stormwater management. Those are the only ones that may be allowed for daily fines. Anything else, as we mentioned, goes as the ordinance provides. So, to summarize, issue 1, must all fines be levied against the property owner? Not necessarily. Certain fines are against the owner, while certain other ones are against responsible persons or anyone who violates. Issue number 2, can a fine be levied upon a contractor? In certain instances, yes. However, they must explicitly state, and as mentioned before, there is reason to want to levy fines against owners as opposed to contractors. Issue number 3, can fines be levied if damage occurs on a neighboring property? No, not under the UDO. However, North Carolina and federal law provide proper remedy for these situations. Issue 4, what may the town fine violators? I point you to 9.4 and 9.5 for the specific fines, and once again, point you to the 9.53 recommendations we have made. Issue number 5, does the UDO require 60 days for vegetation to be replanted? As we mentioned earlier, no, but we do recommend amending 9.5.3 to create uniformity in the enforcement and replacement of dunes, vegetation, and trees. And finally, does the UDO allow for daily fines to be levied? Generally, no, but 9.5.3, 2, and 4, all special remedies do allow for certain instances. And that is all for the UDO specific, and if anyone has any questions, I am open to answer.
Yeah, when you talk about removing trees and the count of if we're fining per tree, how would we know how many trees were removed?
That would be on the planning department to make those determinations. So should they receive the initial notice from, say, a neighbor or from a complainant, they would then undergo their investigation, which I'm sure Mr. Seberg would be able to explain more as to their process from there, but that's where it would start.
Things falling apart. So we do not require tree surveys currently under the code. So it would have to be complaint driven. We go on the site. We honestly look for stumps. That's the best indicator that a healthy tree was previously there. Or we do have some resources available. Carteret County does their annual aerial shots. That gives some indication, but it's not down to the ground level. Google Earth, or they do their street view roughly once a year. What we seem to be finding in Emerald Isle is every February they do new street views of areas. But if it's a deep lot, it's difficult to go in the back of that and make that determination. So it's a very difficult task to determine how many trees are removed in that process.
Yeah, and that's where I'm going with that problem of not being able to specify, from A to B, whether it's a permitted site or unpermitted site. Unpermitted, you just take the risk of, having to figure it out, but a permitted site, there could be arguments either way, and that's where, if we're charging per tree taken out, it's kind of ambiguous and really up to your opinion or your predecessor, the next down the line. So if we're going to set it up to where it's a, per tree fine, I mean, I'd hate to ask for this, but you got to start looking at a tree survey so that everybody knows how many trees were on the tract to begin with and then not on the tract. And that's the only way to really draw a line in the sand and say, no, this 2 3/4 tree wasn't a tree per the ordinance.
Right.
This 3-inch is, you cannot remove it, but you can remove this. I don't really want a tree survey, but for you as the town official to be able to make a black and white, yes or no, this is a $5,000 or a $1,000, is really hard. It puts a lot on you to determine amongst every other task that you have to do.
Right.
Where if you have a tree survey, it's simple. Yeah, it's going to take more time. It's going to cost the builders more money. But at the end of the day, the town official timeline wise, you don't have enough time in the day to track down every single tree issue that comes up, you know?
Right.
And go through Google Earth and go through all these, you know, circumstances that you just stated, when you can just pull up a tree survey and say, yeah, you took these 4 down, and they're supposed to be retained.
Yeah. Well, that's the only way to truly document the trees on site is a tree survey. Again, if staff does it, the best resource we have is just visualization, and we see a tree stump, it looks like, I mean, we've gone across lots where there's a tree stump and you can obviously see where it was eaten from the inside out. That'd be considered a dead tree, but if it's obviously healthy tree, we would count it. But that's the only resource to really accumulate.
And where I'm going with this, I've had sites that are not in the town of Emerald Isle that homeowner says, hey, I want to get rid of this tree. No problem, tree service comes out on Saturday, there's no evidence that tree's there. You know, there's grinders, there's ability to get rid of tree stumps. You know, the violation gets called in on a Friday afternoon or Saturday, the tree stump's gone, you know, there's graded dirt over it, you can put pine straw, it's gone. And that's where, you know, I feel from a contractor side of things, if I'm gonna be required to have a possible fine of $1,000 per tree per day, I don't want him to make a mistake that a $2,000 tree fine is all of a sudden cheap and free. You know, I don't want it to be, you know, unfairly, you know, brought upon me as a contractor saying, oh, you cleared this tree. No, I didn't. It's right here on the tree survey, or vice versa.
On that, I had a couple of trees removed recently with permit. And one of them is down to the stump. The stump is still there. Looking at the stump at ground level, it looks like the tree was alive. It was a bay tree. Deader than be. I mean, there wasn't a life leaf in it. It's been like that for months. So just looking at the stump doesn't give, it's not necessarily, I mean, maybe
No, I agree.
maybe an arborist would know. But just the average person looking at a stump, you might not know whether that tree was alive or dead when it was taken down.
Yeah, I agree, Kenny.
So that, the stump only, the tree survey would solve that.
Yep.
Now, I got permission, trees were dead, we got the permit, Chris issued it, it was free, correct? They were clearly dead. So the best way to do is to get the permit first, before you start cutting down trees.
So, and keep in mind, when we issue permits such as that, we do a site visit. If the applicant has not marked a tree, staff marks the tree and makes a determination, and then we further document it with photographs of which trees we permitted for removal.
Did you check my 2 trees? We sent pictures.
We do, yeah, I mean, even if you send pictures, we still go out there and we document. Staff makes sure, and we log it into our permit file, so we've got the documentation on if it was justified for removal or not. And again, staff made that determination. I mean, bay trees have been easy. You can go and take a look at it, and it's obvious that they're dead.
The best way to avoid fines is get a permit first.
Well, and see, there are some gray zones when you're developing a full lot. When you're taking down 2 trees, I don't mean to discount that situation, but that's black and white, that's easy. Everybody knows, hey, these 2 trees are dead, you get the permit, that's cool. But as a builder, developer, when we go in and clear a lot, you know, your natural area is in AutoCAD on a piece of paper. And there might be a tree that intersects that piece of paper line. What do you do? Now, that's supposed to be remedied by Chris and staff coming out to say, okay, yeah, that needs to come out. You gotta put your silt fence up. You can't put silt fence through a tree, okay? But say you're clearing a lot and, you know, a contractor accidentally takes down 4 trees that are outside of the limits of disturbance after Chris has already inspected it. You know, how, if we're gonna go to a level of fining per tree per day, you got to have some way of black and white saying, no, there was 4 trees there. you have to pay those fines. Or, the contractor could go through there and say, well, you know what, these 4-inch pines, 4.5-inch pines are pretty easy to pull up. The stump comes right with it. 75 horsepower backhoe, it's gone. Nobody would ever know. You can just say, oh, we just disturbed that, sorry. We'll go into this other section where we don't have to worry about clearing vegetation. We'll put some pine straw back, there was no growth there, and move on. But if you had a tree survey, then Chris at final inspection could go through and go, hey, there's supposed to be a cluster of pine trees over there. Where did they go? Or any other type of tree.
Are tree surveys
And-
easy to get and readily available?
Not necessarily. They add to, it's another task that a surveyor has to provide, and we're already behind on surveying. So, in a perfect world, yeah, you get the tree survey, and then you know exactly what you have to clear, so that not only the contractor, but the town is also protected. But on the backside of that, I don't know how we as a town levy $1,000 per tree when the town doesn't really even know how many trees. They're using Google Earth and Street View. How do you expect that to hold up? I mean, if the stump's there, yeah, but it's very easy to take a tree out in the sand and be gone,
So
the whole thing.
again, staff is limited to use the best available resource we have.
Yeah.
So what we have is the annual flyover that Carteret County incorporates in their tax records.
Do you have a photo of that so we could see it? Could you pull that up quickly and see how convoluted that looks at times for a heavily dense area, heavily treed area?
When you wouldn't be able to tell a 3-inch trunk, I mean,
Well,
it'd be
yeah,
3 1/4.
and again, that would be just doing the on-site visit. Oh, yeah. Can you do that? Yeah, just pull up GIS with just one of the aerial photography stuff. This isn't tied into it.
And I just feel like that's a lot of gray area to put on any person that's going to have to make that decision. But I guess kind of going back to that recommendation, is this based on any other town? Have y'all put any other recommendations like this on that daily side?
No, particularly, we were just going based on the current ordinances and trying to maintain what the town already had and just provide more uniformity and transparency with it all. It seems that in particular, the 35% requirement and the per tree per day are pretty special to EI. And so we're not in the business of changing laws, we just want to make sure that they reflect the town's wishes to the best of our ability. So, I mean, we're certainly not beholden to any of these recommendations.
So basically, you're just cleaning the ordinance up a little bit, so there's no ambiguity.
Precisely, and we found especially with the 35% and with this tree vegetation, per day distinctions to be some of the more muddy out of all the ones that we had.
So what Greg has put on the screen is just an example of the limits of clarity that we have at our discretion.
Aerial photo of my lot, you see about 3 or 4 huge live oak trees, not the other 50 or 75 trees around the other.
Yeah, well, what you're seeing more than anything else is a canopy. You're not seeing the actual tree stumps or anything like that. You're just seeing a canopy, which can be deceptive. Again, staff is limited to use the best available resources we have to enforce the code as written.
Where did it ever come up to find people per day, like every day? Like they don't have time to even,
Well, the per day would happen after the 60-day
60-day rule.
notices, so you at least would have, in most instances, 60 days to rectify whatever issue is available. I believe the only one that was a short notice period was the signs. I think you had 10 days to remove an impermissible sign.
okay.
But yeah, it's 60 days for any other daily violation like that.
And most violations are like that across North Carolina.
Right.
If you have a zoning ordinance, they give you time to remedy it, and it's not an immediate thing, but it is retroactive, like you were saying, it trickles back if you.
Some of them
60
are.
days,
I believe the
some.
tree one is not retroactive, so you would start that daily fine at day 61
What if in good faith you started to put them back in though? Like if, I mean, I just think the amount of money this could cost
I
somebody.
think there is some discretion to say, hey, if you have a good faith plan in place.
Okay.
And if, you know,
Okay.
God forbid, day 62, you're just finishing up,
Okay.
that wouldn't be the case.
Okay.
But at the same time, it is the discretion of the planning director
Stressing
and
out.
staff to.
This is for the person that gets a notice and goes, oh, yeah, I'm not worried about that.
Yeah.
That person, not for the normal person that's,
Gonna actually try to fix it.
I'm getting a plan together.
Yeah.
And it's gonna cost me $15,000 to replant. Can I have some grace period? And, I mean, that leaves it up.
Yeah, well, the code does clearly state for trees particular, you have 60 days to replant the tree per code. So that portion of it's not the $1,000 per tree immediately. It's after that, after you receive an official notification or determination that, say, 3 trees were removed from your property, and it's got to say that specifically, you've got 60 days from the date of that notification to replant 3 tree replacement trees.
Right.
Which is, by code, it's 10 foot in height at a minimum caliper of 3 inches. So,
I really like the black and white timeline. I'm just getting hung up on the ability for staff to be able to clearly say,
The
it was
amount.
2 trees or 3 trees or
Yeah.
5 or 1 or,
It protects staff and property owners.
absolutely, both.
Yeah.
Or the other, the builder, developer, the contractor of, you know, of record there. It just, I think it would definitely protect, but it's impossible to get a surveyor to add 2-3 days worth of additional.
that is, I think, legal-wise, that is a great resource for staff to have. The reality is, there is a shortage of surveyors in this region, not just Carteret County. And further, there's a lot of activity occurring in this region.
Well, in your
Do you
case,
think we could possibly, like we're allowing contractors to draw their own stormwater management plan, do you think, as a part of your initial inspection, you know, yeah, it would add a little time on the front end for you, but do you think it would be possible to allow contractors to do a tree inventory? Think it would be some way to incorporate that would allow, you know, the contractor to put their survey together, make their stormwater plan, and inventory trees themselves, of course, with, you know, you double checking it. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know how
So-
much effort that would add for you.
I mean, that, we gotta do a site visit anyways. We have to do a site visit to inspect the natural area staking. So it's logical to have a similar inspection, just have the contractor mark the trees that they feel are, the difficult task is you're not gonna have the, complete accuracy of a survey of the location of the trees, but you can at least get a general count and location of the trees. So that is a possibility. It's not what we have before you as proposed changes that were recommended by the Board of Commissioners, but that is something that we can further discuss on this subject matter.
Yeah, just for the protection of the town, the property owners and the contractors. I mean, I just don't see how we can go to a level of finding, to the level that we've been presented without some type of assurance that these trees are here, they're not, other than what you're using currently, and that's left to chance.
Well, I mean, to take it a step farther, even taking your line of thought there, if contractor, if they're doing their own tree inventory, yes, you're still gonna be off here and there, but your percentage level is going down so much more than trying to bank on what could be a dead tree with a good-looking stump. But it just, anything to get that margin lower without having to go to a full tree survey that we're already so far behind. You don't want to stop folks in their tracks on their business. So I don't see to take it that far, but there's got to be a margin that we'd have to be okay to understand. There's going to be some out there.
in order to implement that daily fine, there would have to be substantial evidence.
Ag-
or a
it-
good photograph of that tree?
Well, again, we're talking about after the event.
Yes.
So the only resource staff has is, again, aerial photography with GIS, Google Street View. Obviously, Google Street View does not look deep into the property. Staff makes site visits. Staff is limited to only seeing a stump and making that determination if the stump looked like a live tree or not, and it's the right caliper and all this stuff. So it is
A tree
very
survey-
subjective.
A tree survey would indicate a healthy tree versus an unhealthy tree?
Absolutely.
What does a tree survey cost on the average lot?
It all, you could have, you're talking about a lot on the eastern end of the town where there's one little scraggly tree that doesn't add any cost to the survey, the topographic survey, the boundary, the Alta survey. Or you could have in Archer's Creek where there's 200 trees per acre, it could add several $1,000s. It's not, in my opinion, so much the cost of the survey is what we dealt with last year with the delay of the engineered plan, is the delays that add the cost. You're talking 6 to 8 weeks right now for a topographic in existing conditions Alta survey, showing what you have and what, basically what the existing conditions are for what you're trying to develop and propose. So this additional request, I wouldn't want to assume anything, but it would definitely add weeks to the surveyor's delay in getting.
Doesn't sound practical.
No,
No.
it's not. Now, being honest, Pine Knoll Shores requires it, and they have required it for a very long time. So it is a requirement there, but I, for one, brought this up just because it's not really practical for our area, I don't think, and I really wouldn't want to see it. But if we're going to make the town staff go through the headaches of finding people for tree violations for a development site, an individual homeowner is one thing, but a development site, it's impossible. I'm making the point, it's impossible for him to know clearly if the tree was there to begin with. There's so many resources that if a developer wants to take out some trees, it can be gone over a weekend.
Not seeing it happen.
Yeah, it's not impossible. So the only way to really have teeth for the town, in my personal opinion, is some type of survey. It doesn't have to be done by a surveyor. Maybe we could mark, have a 2-scale drawing and go in and mark trees and show it on there and, show the caliper and basically take an inventory. It's not professional, but like I said, at least it cuts down on some of the percentage and it increases education to, hey, we're paying attention. This isn't a joke, follow the ordinance. 65% you can play with, 35% don't touch.
And again, well, of course, we're talking about if they're doing a complete development, land clearing does not occur until after staff visits the site, certifies that the natural area has been marked, with flagging, staking, whichever. So it's not saying that, we're gonna be there anyways before they start turning dirt. Add that extra step to it to document what trees have been marked and the number and whatnot, so. That is it's probably more of a reasonable code change than, and don't get me wrong, a survey with a tree, or a tree survey is a very viable resource for town staff. But again, we've got a shortage. They're working long hours. Adding that to it, like Mr. Parker said, likely adds another 2 to 3 days to that surveyor's time on that property, and then it costs the developer and so forth and so on.
Yeah, I like the idea for tree survey, if it could be done cheaply in one day. But
That's
$3,000 is gonna take weeks. That's just not reasonable to require, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you, Kenny. Yeah. One other question that I had, with issue number 6, it said a person fails to restore the land to its natural state. Do we have a definition of natural state? Is that defined as pre-developed, undeveloped, topography the same? How is,
I will find that for you right now.
thank you.
Now, associated with that, nuisance vegetation is excluded.
Yes,
Nuisance vegetation is excluded.
vegetation, yes, although from my understanding, dead trees are not excluded, so any dead tree would also still need a permit, should it be over,
Yes.
Yeah, we
yes.
just.
But vegetation is, there is.
Poison ivy.
Yes.
Vine,
Yeah, that's-
that nuisance vegetation is exempted in there somewhere.
Yeah.
As I recall. But, you know, today marks 20 years I've been on this board.
Congrats, buddy.
20 years
20
ago this
years.
month was when I had my first meeting. And the UDO changed a lot since then. So hard to keep up
The
with.
town has changed a lot.
In fact, my first year, I was on the original UDO committee, and we didn't have UDO. And we broke that out. It took us 6 months, I think, to come up with something, and then several more months to clean it up and pass it around and get everybody to agree on it. And then we started changing it the next day.
Of course, always change. You can always make it better.
Well, thinking of something is different than doing something.
Yes.
When it actually got implemented, there were some things that were not working as we had envisioned.
Sometimes black and white loses its luster in the
On paper,
field.
it looks great, but in practicality,
Yep.
you build houses, it's like when the refrigerator alcove is 36 inches in the rough-in measurement. That doesn't work when you put up sheetrock and trim.
Don't worry about drywall.
Sometimes you've been in a house and the house is cut in half with the door trim is the switch. Because the door trim covers half the box.
Or the countertops inside the casing.
Yeah.
Happens a lot.
Seriously?
A lot.
I've dealt with that many a time.
So from my understanding, natural state refers to the 35% natural designation. So should a violation occur that goes beyond that, it would be required to restore it to that 35% natural state is what that refers to.
So that would be natural grade or just the type of vegetation, the natural elevation of the area prior to, or?
From my understanding, it would be based on whatever the permit states, whatever that 35% includes, whatever natural plants are approved under that, that would be fine.
Yeah, for clarification, the code specifically states that 35% is to be untouched.
So putting it back to its natural state would include elevations, bringing dirt back into a site if it was removed out of the, inside the 35% natural area.
Yeah, I believe it says even topography changes have to be corrected.
So we would be fining until they brought dirt back into the site. If they cut a sand hill out.
I'm not sure it would go that specific. It mentions dunes, so a dune would have to be replaced to its original state. Trees, as I mentioned, not vegetation. So anything that would fall under that vegetation is not required necessarily to be put back unless it is a shortage of the 35%.
Yeah.
So in that case, it would be up to the planning director, I guess, to determine what specifically needs to be done to meet that 35%.
Yeah, see, I think that needs to be black and white. You know, either we need to say vegetation or topography, because inside some of our lots, inside the natural area, you have sand hills. You know, it's not oceanfront, not soundfront, they're just sand hills. And we call them inside 35% natural area. A lot of times we build expensive retaining walls that are lot retaining wall, and there's a sand dune in the middle. It makes no sense to have these homeowners maintain these retaining walls in perpetuity to hold a sand dune back. Nothing will grow on it. It's useless. I mean, you can't even get grass to grow on it. So, you know, if you take that out and that's part of your natural area, does this state that you have to put that back?
It's not that deep into it. I would imagine if it were to be deemed a dune, so is there a distinction between dune and sand?
Absolutely.
Dune
Because
that
dune,
okay.
well, a dune is considered jurisdictional by CAMA, and that's outside of what,
Gotcha.
you know, the oceanfront's one thing, but here, say you're, you know, down Coast Guard Road and you're in the middle of the subdivision down Clarendon Drive, and there's a sand hill that has no trees on it, it's just a sand hill, and it's part of your natural area. Is the natural state, from what I've always understood, the natural state, the 35% natural area is to be left undeveloped. So if it's developed, meaning dirt cut off of it, to bring back into compliance, you have to put the dirt back.
The UDO does not state that in particular, so I could not opine on that. That would have to be a planning director.
Okay. Then the natural state, we need to work that language because that is super ambiguous
Very.
to people that are in the industry.
I agree.
Natural state to me is pre-development, whatever the topography was, you put it back to that. No matter if there's trees, grass, or it doesn't matter about grass, but trees. It doesn't matter if it's just vacant land.
Well, and if it's, I mean, to be honest, if it's difficult for those that put this stuff in practice on a sometimes daily basis, just imagine Junkie Public that doesn't do this type of work on a daily basis. It's even that much more confusing.
Absolutely.
If you're not involved in such work, so.
Yeah, and that's where I was, you know, trying to spell it out where it says to its natural state.
Yeah.
What does natural state, what does that combination of words actually mean?
And I would have to presume that whatever the distinction of that 35% natural area, when the permit is given, at that time, that is what's deemed a natural state. And any variation from that would have to be
It has to be
addressed.
brought back.
Either
That
through a
state.
variance or through returning it to that
Yep.
natural state.
Good, thank you.
You think it should be specified more clearly to explain that?
Definitely. It should be black and white because we have some in our town that think that the natural area can be graded if there's no trees there. They think the natural area is trees. And the definition of the natural area in the UDO as it states is undeveloped land. It has nothing to do with trees. It is developed or not. And currently we have 35% that cannot be touched. Unless-
Undisturbed natural area.
Exactly,
So-
undeveloped. So undeveloped encapsulates everything disturbed. Like technically, if you want to remove a tree, you have to remove the tree, but you leave the stump in the natural area because it changes the topography of the natural area, correct?
Correct.
So you can still get a permit to remove a dead tree as long as you go through the proper channels, but in the natural area, it's topography driven, which takes care of, if you leave the topography the same, you're not taking trees out.
Just needs to be clarified.
Just needs to be clarified so that everybody, you know, reviews the ordinance in the same manner and we don't have 500 different opinions looking at the ordinance.
And that was largely the purpose of what we had done, was to make sure that there is less arbitrary enforcement and to encourage you all to define more specifically. Trees are pretty well defined. I think that's not up for much debate, but vegetation in particular and that natural area, we certainly saw there really isn't as firm of a definition as there is with trees.
I can tell you personally, because I've been doing this 25 years, it's a lot easier when it's black and white. You can show the owner, violator, hey, look, the code says, and it's very clear. I've always, when I draft codes, I always do my best to make sure there is little to no gray in there. It's just straight and to the point. And that's the way, especially something like this should take place. It leaves those errored interpretations. It's just straightforward. You do this, this is what happens. This is a violation by da 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 da.
There's a big difference between the word shall and may.
Right,
That's what we're talking about, basically.
correct.
may means, shall means it's got to be done. So that kind of clarification we need on natural areas.
So, those are both good subject matters. I think in the review of what's before you, I can, when I do the presentation to the Board of Commissioners upon your recommendation on these code changes, I can point out the planning board would like instructions to look at the following 2 more items to help clarify this, make it an easier read for everybody in the town of Emerald Isle that owns property. I mean, they have a right to know what is permissible, what's not. It's a lot easier if it's straightforward, so.
Yeah, I think, any other discussion?
No, not right, I do not. I was gonna say, I'm trying to figure out how to make the recommendation.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Both pieces.
How to make a motion?
Yeah, I would
well-
make a recommendation.
That's it.
Well,
that we-
let me put it on, hey, Craig, can you put the presentation on the screen, please? All right, so, and you guys have this in your packet. It's not as clear as I'd like for it on the bigger screens, but this is the code changes that were recommended by legal staff. Obviously, the strike through is the deletion, and then the additional information. So in determining this change, and we'll go through this on the other items we're discussing tonight, you do have to have a statement of consistency, that you have a draft in front of you as part of your packet. And this is labeled as draft because it's under the assumption that you guys are going to recommend approval as submitted. If you change that, we have to adjust this, and that's no problem. It is a digital document. We can make the necessary adjustments. So as far as potential actions, you've got those 4 options in front of you. You can, again, you can approve as submitted and approve the statement of consistency as submitted or as adjusted. You can make a motion to recommend the approval of the changes with some adjustments. And same goes with statement consistency. You can table a decision on this item until, let's say, the February 24th meeting of this board, or you can make a motion recommending denial of the proposed.
And we can make a conditional recommendation, am I correct?
You can't, that's number 2, is if you want to make any adjustments to the code specific that's before you. But what I would say is you go through that whichever recommendation you guys want me to present to the Board of Commissioners, but you can add to it, say, Chris, we would like for you to present these items for us to review further. The
Yeah.
definition of natural state, if or when a tree survey would be required.
I feel like we're setting ourselves up for failure to approve it without having those definitions.
I agree with that.
Yeah, so I would probably,
We've agreed that we're not going to require a tree survey. have we not?
correct, but the definition of the tree survey would either be a licensed surveyor or the contractor provide a document over a 2-scale drawing that shows the existing trees as defined by the town on the property.
Okay, so you want these defined and brought back to us next month?
I think that's the best, because I feel like we're setting ourselves up for failure.
I completely agree. I mean, the main issue that is not addressed here by 953 or really anywhere in the UDO is arbitrary and ambiguous enforcement. And, 953 gives you a little bit of guidance, but it can't tell you where the trees are. It can't tell you what everything looked like. And until you guys reach a determination on that, I agree it may not be the best time to enact a new ordinance on that.
So I say we probably just table it.
I would agree that it would probably be tabled currently upon a request of, obviously, number 1 is natural state definition.
Yeah.
Yes, and then the second would be if we're in staying away from the tree survey by a surveyor to see if the request for a contractor to do a inventory on a lot prior with, obviously, that's just another step of approval. It just cuts down that margin a little bit.
Does that work for you and your daily job?
Well, like I said, so dealing with raw land, we're having to go out there and document the natural area staking anyways. That's because again, the tree removal is limited to that 35%. The code's clear on that. So we're already there, we're inspecting the staking. I would envision writing the code as such to where it would have to be a certain marking on the tree ribbon typically. And just a inventory by the developer if we're gonna shy away from the survey side, which I think is probably the more efficient way of doing it. Have the developer give the inventory and then staff verifies it while they're on site. Yeah, it's likely to add maybe 10, 15 minutes to the site visit, but, I mean, we've gotten pretty efficient on these things. We're rolling through them, so.
Okay, so we can close this issue without a vote, just knowing that your next meeting, you're gonna
Well,
bring in the language we requested for the, not a tree survey, but a tree inventory.
it sounds like that the board's interest is to table a decision until the next month for staff to bring back these items for consideration on top of what's
Those two items.
correct.
And if I may, real quick, under chapter 10 of the UDO, natural area and natural systems are defined, but natural state is not. And as a matter of fact, natural state is within the definition of natural area. So it would definitely behoove you guys to clarify natural state, just for even my sake.
Well done. Well done on that one.
Clear as mud.
I circled that immediately.
Well done.
It needs to be defined, specified, and clarified.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So do we need to make a motion to do that?
Motion to table. You have all the right words.
So I make a motion to table the rewrite of 9.5.3 dunes and vegetation protection regulations, asking that staff present to the commissioners a change of,
Planning board.
the planning board requires, but the,
Yeah, you say commissioner.
yeah, you propose to the commissioners to relook at the tree inventory, right?
So what I would take this is,
How do you want to call it?
you would table it, asking staff to bring you potential code changes that could be added to what's already been presented to you to better clarify the definition of natural state, how staff is to determine that on site if there is an issue, and then how we are to require some sort of tree inventory on site. I mean, is that pretty good clarification on what
Absolutely.
we've discussed?
That is.
Yes.
Is there a second to Chris's motion?
It's like, can we just say what you just said? This would be meant. This would be
You
meant.
do it so much better than some of us.
Then all of us.
I already forgot the first sentence. I was like,
I
what's that?
wasn't gonna say it go that far. You do a good job, Jim.
No, I don't write ordinances. I just like to review them.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous? Okay. One short I have off the list, only about 7 more to go. Review request B, stormwater management proposed code changes pertaining to maintenance agreements for 1 or 2 family dwelling unit developments with over 10,000 square feet of land disturbance. Trish, you want to explain to us?
Yes, sir. So the way the code's currently written, it separates stormwater systems for residential developments or duplex developments based off the level of land disturbance. So if it's less than 10,000 square feet of land disturbance, it's a small system is, John Q. Public can put it together, and as long as, when staff reviews it, it's a capacity-driven code, so our capacity level is 2-inch rainfall, first 2-inch rainfall. We have to ensure that the conveyance system's there, the topography shows it, and that there's capacity for the volume from a 2-inch rainfall event. If it were to be over, or 10,000 square feet or more land disturbance, the code clearly states it's got to be an engineered stormwater plan. And further, the code states that there needs to be maintenance agreements recorded in the register of deeds specific to that lot, so it's tied into the tax records of that lot, and it requires annual certification by a licensed professional to certify that that stormwater system is operational. So that's a summary of the current codes. Yeah, thank you. All right, so during the December 10th, 24 regular meeting of the Board of Commissioners, they unanimously approved a motion to request the planning board review the town's stormwater management code to the maintenance agreements for 1-2 family dwelling units over 10,000 square feet of land disturbances. Specifically, under considerations are the changes in section 6.3.2, which basically, I summarized that earlier. It defines if it's a requirement or not. If it's over 10,000 square feet of land disturbance, then it goes into a whole different ballgame. So strictly for commercial or for residential purposes, these are the only properties we have in record that had 10,000 square feet or more of land disturbances. Some have recorded agreements, some aren't complete yet. So it's a very small number of lots that are involved on that. So as far as code change, it's just simply taking out the 10,000 square feet of land disturbance, and all residential development is under the small stormwater residential side, and then commercial, multifamily, which is above a duplex, industrial, which we typically don't have, those all fall under the large stormwater system that's having to be engineered. We have to have an agreement. Now, I will point out, this is just a residential. We do have 2 commercial properties that we get, or we have a recorded agreement, and the second one, it hasn't been there for a year to get that annual review, but the first one is Publix, and they submit an annual document to the town for our records, so we do get that. And the other one is the Watson and Matthews facility that they just built. That's also has that requirement, and it's been recorded. So what's before you tonight does not affect the commercial side, but it affects the residential. So again, like we discussed with the previous matter, there is a statement of consistency. It's labeled as draft because it's assuming that you guys are supportive of what's presented to you as written, but it is a digital document. It can be adjusted based off of what recommendations you provide staff. And very similar to the previous item, you've got the same 4 options. Approve as submitted with statement of consistency. You can adjust what was submitted, and the same goes with statement of consistency. You can table a decision, or you can make a motion to deny the recommended code change. So those are what's before you for consideration on this matter.
And I may be wrong here. I think this might have, I know this was a very hot topic when I first got on this committee, or the board, and I remember that it was reworded, y'all did a great job with that. I know it was very specific with the less than 10,000 square foot, more than 10,000. But the rewrite that's there now, that sentence doesn't necessarily affect our point that we're trying to get across. Not everybody has to go through that engineered system. They have to be able to prove what they always have been. Am I correct in that? Am I thinking there?
So what's before you, I'm going to read it word for word as far as a code change. Under section 6.3.2, subsection 2, subsection C, subsection 1. Proposed single-family duplex residential projects, what's being removed or proposed to be removed is with less than 10,000 square feet of disturbed area shall adhere to the stormwater plan requirements, and it labels it out where it does not have to be engineered. So in the following subsection, which is 2, as large residential projects, and probably should take the residential term off of that, just say large projects. It says a professionally designed stormwater management plan designed and sealed by a registered design professional and meeting all applicable requirements of the Unified Development Ordinance shall be required for all, and what's taken out is, what's proposed to be removed is single-family and duplex residential projects which disturb 10,000 square feet or more of land, and for all multifamily residential, commercial, industrial projects. So you're taking that residential aspect out of the large system that has to be engineered, and you're just limiting that to the 3 or more multifamily developments, commercial developments, and industrial developments if we were ever have one.
So basically what we're saying is, to try to alleviate some confusion, we would strict small and put residential projects less than 3 units for subsection I, because they meet all the same requirements. And then subsection 2,
Sure.
we would just say greater than 2 units or commercial, follow these rules. So really, why would we have a designation of a small residential and a large residential when we just have a residential set of codes? Does
Correct.
that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
But the question is really, if you've got a 3-acre tract, let's go an acre tract, you want to allow 35% to stay natural and 75% to be cleared without any official plan. What was the reasoning for the 10,000 square foot and larger originally, Kenny?
I have no idea. I guess it sounds big. I mean,
When most lots in Emerald Isle are 12,000 square foot.
Yeah, I remember
think some
when
of those-
when it came up, it talked to, I know there was an option if you had adjoining lots, something like that, that's where that 10,000 came from, that if you were to disturb anything more than that, it was gonna require an engineered stormwater plan, whereas anything under that number, which shows there's not a lot of them going on, but under that, it was to keep everybody away from, again, going through that engineer, making everybody go through the engineered plan, you're tacking on more time, things of that nature.
See, this was part of the ordinance before that. This was here before
Okay.
that. This predates that change.
Okay,
This has been like this ever since I've done anything in
Yeah.
Emerald Isle. This has been here for a while.
This particular, I've been able to track it back to 2008 on Unicode, our online service, but not the origin date. So I can't say when before 2008 it was incorporated. That's just as far back as the code.
So from a design standpoint, the state is pretty clear. They require erosion control plans by a professional over 1 acre outside of municipality jurisdictions. And I don't know if the 10,000 square foot came in and it got crossed through, 10,000 square foot and larger is built upon area. So if you have 11,000 square foot BUA on the site, you have to have a stormwater plan. So I don't know if those numbers got kind of intermingled at some point in time. You know, I don't see a reason really that there's not very many lots that are left that would trigger this, that would cause concern, in my opinion, as a development, you know, as trying to protect Emerald Isle's natural resources. To have this or not have it, I don't really see why we would make, you know, Lot A have some extra restrictions just because they disturbed a little bit extra on their lot, if they still comply with the 35% natural area.
Right.
You know, I know that's not what we're talking about, but essentially, we're trying to protect the natural resources of Emerald Isle. You know, one thing that we've been talking about, the Stormwater Committee is, you know, it might be shocking to some, but in Emerald Isle, we don't have a built-upon area requirement other than 65%. We, you know, 35 minus 1, you know, if you're outside the CAMA zones, you can build your entire area, you know, and even now, there's new septic design out that is traffic rated. It is ungodly expensive, but you can put it underneath your driveway if you want. So, you know, the 10,000 square foot of disturbed area from an engineered standpoint really doesn't concern me much, but a 10,000 square foot of built-upon area does. You know, that could cause concern further than we're discussing now. So I really don't know, you know, I would aim to clarify, you know, just say where that subsection says small residential projects, I would just define it as residential projects less than 3 units. And then the other be residential
Multifamily,
projects
commercial.
above 2 and commercial.
Yeah.
And then that way we have this section for individual lot developers that are proposing single and duplex units.
Yeah.
And then the other for tri and commercial. And that way, as a developer that comes into the area or a homeowner that has a lot, that's had a lot here for 30 years, they don't have to go, what am I reading? What can I do
Where do I
with my
fall
lot?
in?
What can I do? You know, just make it a little more simple. Hey, you're building a house, single-family house, this is your rules. Any discussion?
In my defense, I have no idea why it's here. When we did the UDO originally, we did not discuss the stormwater ordinance other than say, yep, we're gonna hire a consultant to write it.
There you go.
Because that's, it's required by the state that to meet certain standards, and we need a stormwater engineer to write that entire ordinance. And trying to read and understand that, not being an engineer, I was just like, yeah, they did good.
Good enough. Yeah, I just didn't know where, the 10,000, I've always questioned, like, where does, I mean, it's in the ordinance, so, hey, we'll follow it, but why, you know, I'm always interested in the history of Emerald Isle is a great place to live and has been and will continue to be, and ordinance were set up for a reason.
It may have been required by the state at that time. You said 2008, that's about the time we did that.
Well, that's the furthest I can track it online.
I think it was 2006, we did the UDO, I'm not positive.
Well, essentially, it was, the 10,000, the origin of that is likely, you said the town hired a engineer to put it together or somebody to draft it. It was just that number that they came up with as that dividing factor, so.
Well, there's 6 of us on the UDO committee. With our combined knowledge, couldn't write it, even begin to. So, that'd be like asking me to tune up a 67 Chevrolet and, you know, by sound. No, I don't. But yeah, what you're saying, it makes perfect sense. That simplified even a little further by the way you said it.
Just dividing it residential, less than 3
Less than
units.
3.
And more than 2 and, commercial.
Commercial.
Can you make a motion to that effect?
I will make a motion to the staff, to approve the ordinance change with the modification of stricting small residential projects, rewriting as residential projects less than 3 units for subsection 1, and subsection 2, rename large residential projects as greater than 2 units residential or commercial projects,
And modify the statement of consistency.
and modify the statement of consistency.
Do we have a second?
I second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I'm sure you're gonna see this, just the second all, that red line through that second all, or the first all,
Yeah.
grammar junk,
Yeah. All,
all,
Oh, all.
all of it.
Okay, just so you all know, this one should be much simpler, because this is pretty much, pretty much. C, code changes to chapter 6, 7, and 10 of the Emerald Isle Unified Development Ordinance to comply with some of the legislative changes approved during the 2024 short session. That's state telling us we gotta do this, so if you
All right, so on the screen, we've got a real quick presentation. We're talking about specific code changes to chapter 6, 7, and 10 of Emerald Isle Unified Development Ordinance. And again, that's to comply with some of the legislative changes approved by the North Carolina General Assembly during their short session in 2024. So this was originally, actually, I presented the write-up to the town manager. We requested Carolina Law Group to review the potential code changes. They provided their write-up of that, and during the January 14th, 2025 regular meeting of the Board of Commissioners, they gave instructions to move forward with the recommended changes. Specific code changes include verbiage on performance guarantees under Chapter 7, which is your subdivision regulations. Additional verbiage on freestanding signs under Chapter 6, that is specifically if there's a freestanding sign that was compliant when it was installed and we require them to move, we have to compensate them for that. We essentially acquired a sign and then we have it removed. And then Chapter 10 is just additional definitions specific to that freestanding sign, and then another change to Chapter 6, and it's specifically on Chapter 6, we also have Chapter 2, we have changes to vegetation under a billboard. We do have billboards that are existing and they're non-conforming, but they're existing, in any of them on Highway 58. State code says we have to allow them to clear vegetation underneath it, make it visible. And of course, Chapter 6 is stormwater management. It's specific to AstroTurf, but that is something that I wanted to present to the Stormwater Committee as part of some of the recommendations they intend on presenting to you guys. So the AstroTurf is not on what's being discussed tonight. So specific to, this is that 2411, that is the clearing of debris underneath a billboard that is fronting a North Carolina highway. Bluntly honest, we have no choice but to make sure that we have something like this in our code to cover those situations. Same goes, here's the freestanding sign code. It's specific on ours under section 6.6 with the removal of already permitted sign, and then the definition supporting that under 10.2. And then section 7.4, which is under subdivision regulations, is the performance guarantees. This one, I mean, it's required. We're supposed to have it in our code. We have subdivision regulations, but the likelihood of this coming forth would only likely occur, let's say, if some of these and I'll say this, we've had this similar discussions during stormwater committee meetings. of what-if scenarios. You have large chunks of land, parcels of land that are currently mobile home lots that could get redeveloped into an actual subdivision. Very similar, a good example, if you look at what used to be an RV park right there at the foot of the bridge is now it's Sunset Landing is the residential neighborhood it was converted to. Those kind of scenarios are certainly possible in the future for Emerald Isle. So we felt the need to ensure that that was in our code to ensure that we're compliant with these changes. Again, you got a statement of consistency. It's labeled as draft because it's assumed that as written, you guys would recommend, but it is a digital document. It can't be changed if recommendation says so. So you've got those same four options on taking action on these items as the other item. So that's all I have unless there are any questions. And Mark's also available for questions. He did a comprehensive review on those changes.
This, just asking y'all, seems like something that, I mean, it's gotta be in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, standard stuff.
I mean, that's all it is. It's protecting town. We're keeping up with where we're supposed to be and what we're told we're supposed to have.
Yeah.
And I trust those two up there to do it properly, so they wrote it. I recommend we just say, yep.
Yep, and then so those three, then there's 7 other ones that are discretionary, so you guys are able to take an advisement, or you could ignore it, but those are the only 3 mandatory.
Anybody think anything or concerned or want to talk about?
No, I read through it.
I read through it.
I don't see anything that's any out of the ordinary.
Didn't either. It was odd to read about the lien relief in it. I mean, there are new rules we have to implement for a lien relief. I mean, that's kind of what it says, but if they got to put them in there, it makes sense to put it statewide. Once you find out what the problem in one region, it can be developed to another. But, anybody like to make a motion?
Well, I mean, on that one, I think it's pretty clear cut that I'd make a motion to approve as it's written. No further changes on our part.
I second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
Did that motion include I have to ask, consistency statement?
Oh, sorry. Motion to include the statement of consistency as well.
Thank you.
Forget about that one.
All right. So the rest of this stuff is going to be real quick.
I got to introduce it
Promises,
first.
promises.
Hmm?
Let me introduce it. I got to do my job.
Oh, okay.
Next item on the agenda, Fort County Planning Board.
All right, so before you have, and again, since it's been some time since we met, you've got the planning department activity reports for the month of September, October, November, and December for review. And I think Susan was one who recommended, so you'll see on these reports, not only what we did for the month in 2024, but also what we logged in for the month in 2023, and we intend on moving that forward on, comparing 25 to 24. And of course, the code enforcement actions, planning board actions, and then the running record for those months. And then added to December is the running record for site visits. And that gives you guys an idea of just how staff is ramping up, site visits, code enforcement site visits, helping public with questions or concerns on their site-specific development. We're just doing our best to help things around. As far as upcoming meetings, you've got Board of Commissioners scheduled for February 11th, 2025, and this board is set to meet February 24th, 2025. So that's all I have unless there are any questions. That's correct.
That wasn't listed there, but it is still scheduled.
It is still scheduled, yes, sir.
Any questions? Chris? Okay. Second to last item on the agenda, comments from the board. Ethan?
No real comments. I think the Stormwater Committee is coming up with some decent ideas on some changes proposed to bring to this board. I think it'll probably take until March, to get our ideas together and present them for the April meeting. I know several of us are gonna be out of town for the meeting in February, so I think we'll have some comments ready for March and present them to the planning board in April.
Thank you. Andrew?
I'm all good.
Jim?
I have nothing.
Oh, you gotta tell about your adventure later.
Oh, yeah, that can be later on.
We're hungry, Kenny, we're hungry. We're hungry.
Sounds like angry to me.
Getting there,
Getting
there.
angry.
Wrap it up.
All right, I'll keep this short. It only takes about 30. Motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
A second.
Any discussion? We can drag this out another 10 minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye.